All right. So tonight we'll be looking at lesson number 7 in our workbook about covetousness, and we'll just cover about half of that in our Overcoming Sin book. And then we'll finish it up Sunday. So we'll turn there. I will say I did leave my lesson at home, but I had some notes in. And I just realized that when we got here, and it's too late to grab it, so it is what it is. But just kind of a little heads up on that. I may lose track on some of the questions. But what we'll do is we'll seek to answer the first 5 questions of the book. And that's a good dividing point. We'll talk about what is covetousness, how it's defined, some of the dangers of it, the things that are related to it, associated with it, and all of those types of things. And then on Sunday, we will talk about how to overcome that. And so some of this will kind of cross over, and as we answer the questions, it'll kind of cross over as well. And so any participation, of course, is welcome. And I know I'd appreciate that. Get some different thoughts and different opinions on this. I think it is one of those things that, not so much like what Randy had to deal with, talking about worry, and that you don't often think about it in that sense. There's plenty of scripture. As we go through this lesson, you'll see that deal with covetousness, that warn about covetousness, and talk about the things that are associated with that. And so I don't think anybody's going to dispute that covetousness in itself is a sin, but I do think that sometimes we're not always on guard of that. We're not always thinking about that or have that on our mind, especially maybe today in today's society. And Brother Rogers talks about that in the intro of the lesson, about all the things that we are dealing with in this world. And when I was thinking about that, it makes sense. We're easily distracted. There's so much in front of us. You think about social media, commercials, everything that's presented to us as far as advertisement is, you need this, you need that, buy this, this will make you happy, your life will be better with our product. We all know how much is spent on Super Bowl commercials, things of that nature, and it's because there's a return on that product. We give into it and we buy it. And so when I was thinking about that, if you think about the original warning, here in our Bible from years and years and years ago, it's clearly nothing new. And sometimes I think when we discuss different sins and different things that we ought not to do, I think we think either 2 categories. We have it worse today, or possibly that applies more to them in the past, right? And so when thinking about covetousness, I don't want us to think that we have it worse. While there may be a variety of temptations, it's certainly something that goes back to the very beginning, right? Genesis chapter 3. What happens there, right? Sin is introduced into the world. How? Right. We see there that Eve, first the serpent, Satan, tempted her and saw that it was good for knowledge. She saw that it was good for food. And she desired it. That's the word that is used there. She desired it. And interestingly enough, that is the same Greek word that is used, that is translated in Joshua chapter 7, one of the examples he points out with Achan, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. That same word that is used to describe desire is the same word that is used to describe covetousness. And so it's not something that is new. It's something that we all may struggle with or have struggled with in our life. I know it's nothing new to me. I certainly like things. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, things that I was kind of wanting to address and thinking about as I went through this lesson is when does drive, right? When does our motivation, when does that become covetousness? And what is it to covet? Is it limited to money? No. that's often the sense that we think of it in, because I think that's probably the most prevalent. What is the opposite of covetousness? And we'll talk about that on Sunday, to be content. And what does it get in the way of? And ultimately, why shouldn't we covet? Okay, so I think he had a comment. Like I said, I forgot my book, but something to this nature that we end up spending money that we don't have on things that we don't need, and ultimately, a lot of times it's to impress people that we don't even know. I was looking for my notes. Yeah. So impressing people that we don't know. It reminded me of a video I saw not too long ago, and I remember this starting out early on when so as a hobby of mine, I like to exercise and things like that. And early on, you're like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to impress people, and ladies like this, and come to find out, the only people you impress are other dudes. They're really the only ones interested in that type of thing. So it kind of in the same sense as we do all this, and we try to impress people that we don't even know and probably don't even care. But let's look at question number 1 to start with. Let's get some definitions and some discussion on what it is or what it means. I believe it asks how is covetous defined or something to that effect. So who wants to answer that? Kaylee, you want to answer that?
It says what is the literal meaning of the Greek word?
Yes. Yeah.
More to have.
More to have, right. It's literally translated into more to have. Okay. Now he focuses on the Greek word pleonexia, and there are, like I said, a variety of words that are used to be translated into covetousness, and I thought it'd be helpful to go through those, and there's a reason why he focuses on that one. But another word is used epithumeo, and so that word is translated as covetousness or to covet sometimes, and that word itself means to fix the desire upon. And when it uses when you fix your desire upon it, that word upon means passionately, right? You're passionate about it, you want it, and this word can be used whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Okay, right? We can desire spiritual things, and so hence to long for, and in Acts and Romans it's used to covet evilly. Another word is erego. It's the idea to stretch after, to covet after, to reach after. We'll talk about 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10. That's the word that is used there. It's this idea that, think about the jar of cookies on the fridge, right? That's just what I think in my head. And you're reaching for that. It's your sole focus. It is, in that moment, it's all that you want, right? You're stretching for it. And then pleonexia, the word that he focuses on here, literally a desire to have more. This word is always used in a bad sense. And so that's probably why he's focused on that word. It is used throughout the New Testament in some of the passages that he uses there. It has a focus on material possessions. Let's see, one of the definitions for that word is also used as a matter of extortion, a gift which betrays the giver's unwilling to bestow what is due. It's also used in the form of sensuality, greediness, covetous practices. And so it's this unquenchable thirst to get more and more, to be, quote unquote, satisfied, right? But we understand we'll never be satisfied by that. And then often there's a lot of emotional responses that come with covetousness. If you think about something maybe in the past or recently that you've desired, there could be positive emotions, but ultimately there's a lot of negative emotional responses. Things like envy, right? That contentment, not contentment, discontentment or resentfulness aroused by someone else's possessions, right? You envy that. You can't be happy for them because you want that. That should have been you, right? Other emotional responses, and I didn't come up with these. This is something I had looked up, but often ingratitude, dissatisfaction, resentment, again, bitterness, insecurity, anger, hostility, all of these things. We've known, or we have been ourselves, but we at least know somebody that is envious, right? Or has been envious. They can't be happy for anybody because they don't have these things, right? So a lot of those emotional responses are because we covet those things ourselves. And so when I originally thought of this lesson about coveting and the desire to have more, I thought, well, okay, why is the desire to have more sin? Because last I checked, we're supposed to, pick our boots up by bootstraps and work hard and all those things, right? We are supposed to be hard workers. Proverbs 10, chapter 4, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of a diligent makes rich. 2 Thessalonians 3:10, Paul says there, we know there in that context those guys were being lazy, but for even when we were with you, we would give you this command: if anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. For we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busybodies. Now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. So what do you think? I'll just open that up to you. And I have some scripture to go along with that. I'm kind of being facetious here, but, why is that desire to have more sin?
Well, also, we often, and I often think a lot of money and material matters on covetous, but we've also got other people's husbands, other people's wives that you can covet, other people's lives. If I just had a life like them, and so on, there's so much you can covet. It covers every aspect of your life.
Yeah, it's exactly the problem with David. That's launched his issues there.
Maybe friendships with other people, family-wise, like he said, like, oh, I wish that maybe somebody's not able to have children and they're envious of other people who are able to have children. Comparison is the thief of joy. So, I feel like a lot of people can be jealous of a lot of things and lustful after what they have, which is also a sin. Or just a lot of it. The way that you behave, maybe they wish they could be like you and present yourself. Or beauty. People might say, oh, well, I wish I was as pretty as this person or as handsome as that man and whatnot, and be envious of you because they don't look at themselves from the inside rather than the outside.
Yeah, good point. Ultimately, a lack of contentment in all those regards.
Yeah, along that lines, it's a recurring theme in all these ones we've studied in the past here, is when I'm coveting after something, it means I have a lack of faith in God providing for me. So that's when it becomes, hey, I want to have, a nice shirt like you have, and guns,
Come on, man.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But God provided me with what I have, and that's what He wants me to have.
Yeah, beautiful voice. Yeah.
What define guns?
Yours aren't as big as his.
Randy.
Say oftentimes it's because of what it leads to as well, that it leads to sin. So think about like overspending, something that you might want that you can't afford, so you aren't a good steward of God. What's money, what He's blessed you with, and therefore you overspend, or maybe even you're so focused on something that you're coveting that you're spending a lot more time focusing
for sure. And we'll talk about that, so be quiet and stop stepping on the list. Yeah, it's going back to the topic of just the money aspect of covetousness. And there's other examples that we'll use if I can get to them. But, Paul told the Colossian brethren in chapter 3 in verse 23, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. And one more, Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 28, let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. And so, putting that in context, there is a purpose behind our work. There's nothing wrong with trying to better yourself, right? There's nothing wrong with improving your situation. It's when that becomes our sole focus. And we're no longer doing things as a servant or a service to God. We're putting ourselves first. DJ? That's it.
Well, I think that's where we need to be careful, because we're supposed to have our mind on the things above, spiritual things. Those are where our desires need to be. And He says that He'll clothe us and He'll feed us, like the birds and the flowers and things like that. But I think a lot of the times where covetousness gets crazy is there is never that fulfillment that people are searching for in those things that they covet. And that's why, like to Randy's point, leads to more and more sin. And our only fulfillment that we're ever going to find is living through Christ. And every time we shift our focus to these things on earth, and we can define them as, well, it's going to be good for our family. Well, what's the best thing for a family? It's spiritual life, and things like that. So, there's a fine line with all of these sins that, we can make good excuses for a lot of them. But, the truth is, it says don't covet because it doesn't lead to anything, and it gets in the way of what we should be desiring, godly lives. And like you said, when you brought up, I think we're supposed to work hard. Well, we work hard for why? To provide, to help others. And I think when it does come to, well, I'm doing this for more money, that's where it gets, well, why?
Yeah.
That's what a struggle I go through all the time is why am I going to do this? Is it going to better my family? Am I going to help people with this? Or is it because I want more stuff?
Yeah. No,
And that's where it gets sketchy.
I'd venture to say that most people, if they're being on guard of this, think about that a lot as well. I know I do. Luke chapter 12, speaking of that in verses 13 through 15, here you have Jesus speaking to a multitude of people, and a guy shouts out, "See, teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But Jesus says to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbiter over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." Now, that sounds like a fair proposal, right? Hey, we're supposed to split this inheritance. But his mind was set on the physical, not the spiritual, like you were saying, DJ. And we can lose focus of that. Solomon said it in Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and verse 10. I think that's in the lesson too. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. And so what Solomon is saying there is essentially Econ 101. I remember learning that early on in some economics classes. There's a law that's called law of diminishing returns, right? If your love of possessions is your sole focus, what happens? So you see, and you draw all these graphs, and it's annoying with supply and demand. But what you see in the law of diminishing returns is this correlation between product and happiness. And I get this thing, and I'm super happy. That's what I was trying to get. Now it just doesn't please me as much. So I go to the next thing, right? And so there's this law of diminishing returns where whatever you were trying to get out of that, it always fails. And so you think about it, whatever hobby you might have, fishing or I don't know, I can't think of another hobby right now, but say fishing, right? How many fishing poles do fishermen have? Like a bazillion, right? Could they get away with one fishing pole? Yeah, but it becomes a hobby and a collection. And there's nothing, like I said, there's nothing wrong with enjoying things. It's when it becomes your sole focus, and you're like, how can I get this? What's the next thing I can do? How can I obtain this? And you kind of lose sight of your spiritual inheritance. Okay, and so I got to move on. I'm not making good time for you. Let's see, number 2. Name some sins listed alongside covetousness. And really, he points out three different verses in the lesson that lists a number of things along with covetousness.
Fornicators.
Yeah. That's one of them. Adulterers. Theft. Yeah. 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 So it's a whole host of them. And what I think we tend to do on things like covetousness is think, oh, it's not that bad of a thing, right? We tend to rationalize, oh, that's not that big of a sin. But we see here, it's named amongst all of these things. And what I notice from a lot of these things, and really sin in general, is, it's selfishness. It's what do I want? How can I gratify myself today? And then it reminded me of a book that I was reading. There's this Greek word there is a Greek word which is telos. And basically it translates into chief aim. So if you think of your life as an arrow, which direction is it going? What is your chief aim? And it has to do with despair and realigning your focus with hope and putting that hope in God. And ultimately, nothing can fail if that's what your hope is. But if you're putting your hope in other things, once you obtain that, then you kind of fall into despair. I saw a study by the NIH talking about social media. They did a 10-year-long study in 2012 to 2022 that shows a direct correlation between social media and envy and depression and despair. I don't think it takes a genius to know why that is, right? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with using social media per se, because it can be a very good thing and very helpful tool, but when you let your guard down, what do you tend to do? You see everybody on a nice vacation. You see everybody presented in a very great way. They look the best. I remember when I used to put stuff on social media, I didn't put the ugliest pictures I had on there. Scott?
Well, covetousness is also like, we have to be aware that it's like modesty in the sense of not I, but others can dress where it makes somebody lust after us because we're not dressed modest. We can also live our lives, a lot of it's through social media, where we're making everybody covet. If I buy a new truck and Tyler really likes it, I can't help that he's coveting my truck. But if I'm splashing it all over social media with my big fancy house and jet skis and boats and all that, I'm causing others to covet. And that's my main goal. That's what those people's main goal is you covet me, please.
Yeah.
And that's a sin.
Yeah, good point. You're exactly right. There's a right way and a wrong way to do that. I'll come back to you. Cheryl.
I think one of the traps that we get in, or some of us do, is start comparing what somebody else has. And that's the worst mistake you can do. That's something that'll get you down the wrong road. And I think that's something we all be aware of. That's something we don't, if somebody has more than you, you're happy for them.
Yeah.
But we don't need to start comparing what we have to what somebody else has.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that takes practice, I think, too. To purpose in your heart, where you said.
So there's a documentary, The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've seen it but it has where there's an algorithm and it shows to where you
absolutely addicting, for sure. Comment. Yeah.
Okay. One thing for covenant, no, I can't say it. I was very guilty for in my addiction was I would see stuff that I wanted, I wouldn't be able to afford it, and I would go steal it. And I would do this in large quantities, and it became such an addiction to just have those items. It was like chasing after those items before I found God. It was like this kind of vicious cycle, but it was coveting these items and then sinning to get them. Not only sinning to covet them, but sinning to steal them.
Yeah.
Before I gave my life over.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that because I'm going to move on to question number 3, and that's part of how I was going to answer this question as well. But question number 3, he's talking about the verse in Mark chapter 7, verse 20 through 23, and the question is, what warning did Jesus give regarding the sins from within a man? Right. Mark says there it defiles a man, right? This is what he records there. It's a stain. If you look at 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 9, speaking of riches again, but those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. And so it's just generally a very good warning, but I like the way it's phrased there in the ESV as a craving, right? It's that unquenchable thirst. And as a result, some have wandered away from the faith. Supporting coveting habits with things like theft. When you look at Achan, I mentioned Joshua chapter 7 and verse 20 at the beginning. When we have a love for money and we have a desire for more, he's a good example of straying away from that, because here you have a guy who caused the Israelites to fail in the battle of Ai, and ultimately it came down to what he did. He saw something that he desired, and he said he coveted it, and he took it. And he paid a horrible price. Him and his family were stoned. They were destroyed. And so it led to this path, and he ended up hiding it. I mean, he didn't even confess it, right? He had to be confronted by Joshua, and we see that same type of path that was just mentioned a second ago today. Things like theft. Think about gambling, right? What is the ultimate purpose of gambling? Is to hit it big, right? Get something for nothing. Desire to have more, Janae.
Well, I think covetousness is sneaky in the sense of, I think as Christians, to a degree, I'm not saying that we don't desire physical things, but sometimes that's easy for us to spot, right? Like, oh, I'm just wanting bigger, I'm just wanting better, but I think sometimes it's the desiring of good things. Like I understand men struggling for, I want to provide for my family, I want to give, you have a certain expectation of life, but it really hit me when we were struggling to have
for sure. And I'll come back to you one second. Like what you were saying, I talked about Luke chapter 12 a second ago, but in verse 15, he says to beware of it, be on guard, right, is the way it's translated in the ESV. I doubt that, people like Achan and David, even, who David coveted Bathsheba, and, Achan coveted that silver and that garment. I doubt that they started their day going, I'm going to covet this, I'm going to covet that. I'm going to go into this situation, and we see what the spiral that David went down, right? And just all the things that just defiled his heart. He didn't guard his heart. Proverbs 4:23, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. But yeah, DJ, what were you going to say?
I think this goes back to what Scott was saying earlier, but covetousness it's a lot like lust. And Mark 7, when it says, from within, out of the heart of man proceed evil thoughts. With covetousness, it's not, you're going to see things that you desire, but you look at, you stare at them, you go back to them, you think about them. Covetousness, it's all goes back to your mind. I mean, it says hearts, but it's what you think about. And if these things, if you're consumed by the thought of them, when the opportunity arises to get them in a way that you wouldn't necessarily do regularly, you might do that. You might get into theft and things like that. But to control covetousness, you have to control your thoughts. And I think that's it goes from here, it defiles a man, it destroys him from the inside, and it goes into idolatry. You end up, what you worship is what you think about. I think sometimes we play a dangerous game by, well, if it's just in my head, it's not real.
Yeah, for sure. And you're just leading right into that next question, number 4. Why does God consider covetousness to be idolatry?
Well, I put down that anything that comes from my heart, that comes before God, displaces Him. So that would be and we put that, whatever it was, before God.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It becomes our sole focus, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, because we've been talking about money, being rich, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It's when it becomes that's what our desire is. That's what we put first. We're kind of blinded by our spiritual calling. Luke, I think he says in the book that idolatry, or I said it, I don't know. Idolatry isn't just a statue, but anything that we serve, or something to that effect. Like I said, I forgot my book, but Luke chapter 12, since we were talking about that, he goes on to tell a parable in the following verses, 16 through 21, on a guy who had prospered so much, he had so much grain, or so much harvest, I think is the word that is used there. And so now what he has to do is tear down this barn, build a bigger barn, right? And Jesus ends up calling him a fool. And so it reminds me of Matthew 6:24, where you can't serve God and mammon. Mammon isn't just necessarily riches. It's translated as that which can be trusted, right? We put our trust into something else. And so when we covet something, we work hard to purchase it. You want something so bad that it consumes you, whether that be, a person, a house, money, whatever it may be, it just becomes all that we desire. Trevor.
I think that is a great point, that whenever you put something to that level, the reason it's idolatry is because it's taking away from God. It always starts out small. Like, take sports, for example. Say you want to be great at sports. Okay, cool. You practice real hard, and then maybe you practice on a Wednesday night instead of going to church. Maybe you have a game on Sunday instead of going to church. And it kind of compounds on itself that the more you desire it, the more it impacts your ability to serve God in the way that He wants you to serve Him. And it could be, fame, fortune, just wanting to be better for your family, or, it could be a lot of things, but it always will come to a point that you have to serve God or you have to serve yourself. And you can't be both, and you can't have a middle ground. You got to pick one or the other.
Yeah, for sure. James?
Well, it's the reason why God points it out as idolatry is it's a replacement for God. It didn't take the children of Israel long when Moses went up on the mount where they made a golden calf to go ahead and replace Jehovah.
Right.
So, you're replacing God when you do that, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
Whether it be your wardrobe or your job or whatever it is, you're replacing God.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'll do one more comment. I'll make another point. I think we're going to be out of time. Okay.
My question is just, when the Lord blessed Solomon, right? He sought the kingdom first, wisdom to lead the nation, right? So then God blesses him with wealth beyond measure. So I can't hard time squaring that with what we're talking about, because here he puts this guy in a situation where he's the richest man in the world, right?
Yeah.
So
For
how
sure.
is that not a contradiction? Like, he's not setting him up for failure, but
Right.
we're flesh.
Yeah, so for sure. I'm glad you asked that, because I don't want anybody to take away that there is something wrong with having a lot, right? David certainly had a zeal for God, and he was blessed with a lot of things, given the throne, and ultimately through his own free will, he coveted, right? And he lost a lot of that. And had problems within his family, right? Infighting, had all these things that he was told was going to be a consequence of that. And so for Solomon, the same thing. He's blessed with this wealth and these riches, and because man has free will, we're ultimately tempted and can make mistakes. And so he could have done so much, right? He could have done innumerable things for the Israelites with that wealth. And I think that, perhaps maybe don't lose sight of God blessing him with those things. And not that if we follow God, we'll be blessed with those same types of riches, right? He uses people in different ways as well. But I get what you're saying. I think that, I don't think that there is anything wrong with that. I think it's just when we lose focus of those spiritual matters. I don't know if I explained that well.
James 1:13 says, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed."
Amen.
And so I think, God is the all-wise and all-powerful, and, we learned a lot from, Solomon, and the whole reason he did have all those blessings was to show that we will never be fulfilled by things on earth. The richest and most wise man on earth said the whole purpose of man is to serve God. And, that's what God was using Solomon for.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I'm out of time. Question number 5 kind of goes right into the other half of this lesson anyway. I have one more point on family, and I'll just cover that on Sunday. Appreciate it.